is I was thinking about that. What happens when they have adverse reactions? The school is now going to deny it. I mean, this is really the big pharma enticing the school to aid and abet and be part of this crime, because I've already seen cases in the last 20 years, this infant death, sudden infant death syndrome, and it turned out the child has a convulsion, dies that night, or in the car sometimes. Sometimes they die in the nurse's office or at the hospital. Then they come and say, well, we did a CAT scan, there's blood on the brain, you beat your child. And then it's actually come out in court, no, it was the vaccines. It's like that Sky Television piece they had where the girl got the Gardasil and died in the class. Thank God, or they would have said the parents killed her. I mean, this is so incredible that they do this. Dr. Wakefield, we're out of time for InfoWars Nightly News, but we have a feature that a lot of the viewers watch that is special reports. I'm going to end the show here because of time constraints, but please stay with us if you will. I want to come back and try to give you the floor for 10 minutes or so to get into some of the other incredible things you're working on. But you are certainly a humanitarian. In closing, tell the viewers out there the websites where they can learn more about what you're doing.
Well, I think EBCALA is a website they need to go to, the Elizabeth Burt Center for Law and Advocacy. So this is something where they will, if they want to catch up on this story and see how it's perceived by those people who, as you know, expose the fact that autism had been compensated, or children whose neurological injury that resulted in autism has been compensated for now nearly over 30 years by the government, while they were denying it on the other hand. That's a very good place to go to get an update on their position on this particular issue of the Gardasil and the Cervarix vaccines. And then your site specifically as well. My site is callous-disregard.com, where people can go to read my book, and vaccinesafetyfirst.com is another website where we have a lot of information posted. Well, I just want to say, Dr. Wakefield, in closing, I appreciate the fact that when they demonized you, they lied at you, you never left the arena and only kept swinging. And on other shows, and even national news in England's had to admit that there were other scientists that had separately done the same research but not published it, that found the same thing. And there have been other now research done duplicating exactly what you found, and that it's a hoax, that you engaged in any fraud. And the fact that they targeted you out of thousands of doctors and scientists and activists is because you are articulate, you are very effective, you've got a lot of Hollywood stars like Jenny McCarthy involved, and they're scared of you. But like the phoenix, you are rising again because you never got swatted down to begin with. And I can't think of a more important issue than this medical big pharma tyranny that we can be fighting. And God bless you for your stalwart. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you so much. We're going to come right back to you in Overdrive. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for InfoWars Nightly News. This is the type of information we cover here each and every day. And it is a real honor to be able to work with people like Dr. Wakefield and the countless other individuals out there who cannot be bought, who cannot be intimidated. We know cancer rates have doubled in the last few decades. Diabetes has doubled, the major type. We know that our friends and family are dying of cancer. We know, as we covered earlier, the Rockefeller Foundation plan to put sterilants in vaccines and also cancer viruses. We will cover this eugenics agenda. It started in England, became popular in the United States. The Rockefellers funded Adolf Alois Hitler. He carried out his first tyranny through medical tyranny, and that's all this is basically a profit motive linked up with a bunch of control freak eugenicists who are above the law. It is time that the court of public opinion rout out these devils. Lord willing, we'll see you back tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, for InfoWars Nightly News. Great job to the crew. Again, we'll see you out there, ladies and gentlemen, on the front lines. Okay, my friends, that was the Nightly News. Because I've got a lot of TV systems wanting to start picking this up, we've got to start honing it down to 30 minutes in the next few months. But now we're going to start posting these expanded interviews in the special reports section of PrisonPlanet.tv and InfoWarsNews.com. And please download these videos, upload them to YouTube, share them with everyone you know, because we are definitely having a big effect. Doctor, that's my final question, and then I want to give you the floor for at least 10 minutes to flesh out any other areas that I didn't get into because I was asking a lot of the questions. Is it not a buoying, positive sign that every other Republican candidate, Mitt Romney, Michelle Bachmann, and of course driven by Dr. Ron Paul, who first started talking about it,
that they're all attacking Rick Perry for it, that it's driven down his poll numbers, that we've seen national polls of close to 90% are against Gardasil and think that Perry trying to push forced inoculation was wrong. I mean, is that not a really positive sign that going from being voices in the wilderness, now this is becoming one of the biggest issues in the country? And because you are a leading advocate for vaccine awareness of the dangers, what are you seeing? I mean, is my political and media view of what I'm seeing, is that accurate? Are people waking up?
Yeah, well, my principal concern, Alex, as you know, is vaccine safety, a safety-first vaccine agenda. So what we have here is a fascinating situation. There is nothing that the federal agencies, the CDC, and the pharmaceutical industry want more than to keep this out of the news, to be silent about this, to pass the laws that allow them to do what they want, but for it never to make the news. Now, God forbid it's reached the national stage where it's become an issue during the presidential candidacy race. Now, that's an extraordinary situation, and it's not going to go away. So they've overreached, they've overstepped, and now it's part of the mix. And when Dr. Kaplan, the bioethicist, I say with some reservation, from UPenn, offered $10,000 to the Congresswoman to find someone who had been injured by this vaccine that resulted in mental retardation, then it raised the stakes even further. It kept it in the news. Now, an Australian businessman whose daughter was damaged by the HPV vaccine has come back and offered $10,000 to him to prove that children have not been injured in this way by the vaccine. So suddenly it's right in the news, front and center, and it's not going to go away. And the parents of children who have been damaged by this vaccine or who have potentially been damaged, who are intelligent, articulate parents, who were not anti-vaccine, who encouraged their daughters to get this vaccine, are now regretting it, are not going to let this go away. They are deeply offended by the notion that the CDC are coming forward and saying no one has ever been damaged by this vaccine, it's perfectly safe, when the numbers are there being collected by the CDC itself. And one of the concerns I have is that they're accumulating these numbers, these 20,000, 22,000, whatever it is, adverse reactions to this vaccine. What are they doing with those? What are they doing with those reports? Those reports, each and every one, should be thoroughly investigated, meticulously investigated, with the child investigated, the child examined, the child put through testing. Well, we've
scanned for now almost 5 years the reports on local news. That's where it's been getting out. It's always the same: autoimmune, can't walk, can't talk, blood coming out of every orifice. I mean, this is some nasty stuff. And then they can't debate the fact that in quite a few cases, they drop dead in minutes. I mean, it's bam, shot dead, and they're like, oh, this isn't caused by that. I mean, this isn't going to work. And as you said, these pro-vaccine folks who bought into the system, they're going in and then now experiencing the deaths, the carnage, the convulsions. One of the most common is just little bloody spots all over their body. This is just amazing. And the attitude of the vaccine lobby is, let's just go forward. It doesn't matter. And on top of it, this is something they tried to force. And then we're here complaining about it, and they're saying, oh, no, there's never been a problem, and it's just an amazing hoax.
Well, what you see, what has happened to me, and perhaps you and others in turn, is that when you've come out and said something against vaccine trials or the lack of safety studies, we've been attacked. There's been an unholy attack on us. Well, okay, but the trouble is when politicians get involved, and they get attacked as well, they start to see what we've been going through. And they say to themselves, wow, maybe this is, maybe it all was a great big hoax in the first place. The vehemence of the attack against me for merely suggesting that Governor Rick Perry was wrong in what he did, something to which I think he's now admitted he did the wrong thing. But when you start leveling that kind of attack against other people, politicians, journalists, other scientists, people are going to collectively say, wow, now we know what that guy went through. And this is the attack we get for just making a reasonable request.
That's what happened with Al Gore. As top scientists would come out and say, well, sea levels are dropping and carbon dioxide doesn't cause temperature to go up. Here we have the ice core graphs. We have the sun, the scans of the sun. And they would be attacked and said, how dare you? You need to be fired. That made tens of thousands of other scientists come out and challenge them. And now even the Green Movement is telling Al Gore, he needs to step down and that their carbon tax is basically dead. I think it's that attempt to persecute that you just alluded to that is going to bring back the spirit of research.
I think that's right. They've overreached. They have overreached. And trying to force this vaccine on 12-year-old, 13-year-old girls in California without their parental consent has caused a lot of right-thinking people who are invested in the liberty of this country and the Constitution saying, no, this is not an issue about Gardasil or not. This is not an issue about cervical cancer or not. It's about usurping the rights of parents to determine the healthcare choices of their children. And you cannot take that away. And they've made a huge mistake.
Well, that's well said. Even if you're for this Gardasil, now you want your kids injected without you knowing? I mean, no one should support that. And there's been a few national stories on this. We played a clip earlier of one of these bureaucrats promoting it on Fox News, saying, yeah, it's all right for parents not to know. Or basically being like a deer in the headlights. I mean, this is so Orwellian. Dr. Wakefield, in the time we've got a few minutes, any other points that you'd like to raise? I mean, I would like you just to briefly to talk about, because it was a few months ago that I last interviewed you on it and saw some of the news in England, where it turns out studies previous to yours that you weren't aware of actually duplicated what you'd done, and now others have duplicated it. And we're seeing numbers out of Asia. I saw one country where it's more than 1 in 40 becoming autistic.
South Korea, 1 in 36 children now have an autistic spectrum disorder. That is an extraordinary number. No society can sustain that level of damage. I do not know what is going to happen, and those numbers are surely reflected elsewhere in the world. South Korea is not alone in that. So we have a major, major problem, and until right-thinking Americans, until right-thinking people stand back and say, there is a major issue here, and we need to address it. It is now recognized that the disease is environmental. The mainstream, whatever that was, the old guard have had to completely reverse their position on the relative roles of genetics and the environment. It's now a major environmental disease.
Does it hit boys because, as all doctors know, or at least I've always heard it said, girls are tougher? I mean, why then statistically has it been worse on boys?
A number of things. I mean, we know that thimerosal can interact with testosterone to potentiate the adverse effects of the mercury compound. That estrogen protects the brain, so are girls relatively protected compared with boys?
Are girls really overall tougher, as other doctors have told me?
It may well be. Certainly as neonates and infants, they have a lower infant mortality rate from infectious disease. So history has told us that girls are tougher from the get-go.
Wow. Please continue. This is incredible information. So it's just going from memory. What was it? 30 years ago, it was 1 in 25,000. Then a decade ago, it was, 1 in 5,000 roughly. And then just 2 years ago, it was 1 out of 160. And then 1 out of, 98 in the U.S. And I've seen numbers as 1 in 55. And then in South Korea, you said 1 out of 36. My God.
36. The UK figures are in the order of 1 in 50, 1 in 48.
Well, then they say it's over-reporting and that doctors are just claiming people are autistic. No. I'm only 37 years old. There was a tiny special ed area at the school I went to in Dallas, and then a few years of high school here in Austin. Tiny. Now, some schools, a third of normal schools are this. I try to take my children, just observing, to movies, and they'll have several rows lined up of children who are clearly autistic. And my heart cries out for them. I go to the mall. I go to the hike and bike trail. It's everywhere, doctor. I mean, do we have to have all our children being locked up in this cage of mental brain damage before we do something? I mean, clearly it's the pesticides and all this cocktail of things. But from all the scientists I've talked to, like Dr. Blaylock, prestigious brain surgeon, he says, though, the vaccines push it over the edge because they're injected directly into the body.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. There is an overstimulation of an infant's immune system. They cannot, nor were they ever designed to deal with this barrage of environmental insults in this way from the earliest times. So there is a huge problem. It's no point in ignoring it. We need to address it. As you say, there are now, the numbers are 54%, according to one report recently, of American children have some chronic health disorder. 54%. 1 in 3 children, 1 in 6 children have some kind of neurodevelopmental impairment. This is an alarming number of children and quite unacceptable. The US has one of the highest infant mortality rates amongst first world countries in the world where vaccination is most intensive. So if you're seeking to reduce infant mortality rate in developing countries, then you're not going to do it by introducing vaccinations more intensively. You're going to do it by introducing the basics such as food and water and clean living.
And I've also read the mercury in the vaccines is actually altering our DNA permanently, generationally. This is like waking up in a science fiction